Hi, my name is María Bermúdez. Today's date is May 10, 2021. I'm 25 and I'm here with my partner thing, Luis.
Hello, I'm Luis Fernando Amaya. Today is May 10th, 2021. I'm 28 and I'm here with my partner thing, Anna. Um, yeah, and so we met in Chicago
Yes, we did.
and we have been, well, we lived there for 5 and 6 years. I lived there
Wasn't
for
it
five.
more?
No.
Felt like more.
And I don't know. I'm a musician. I'm a composer and a percussionist, and Anna is a graphic designer.
Yeah.
So our time there basically revolved around kind of like the artistic world. Um, Mainly, what?
Nothing.
I thought you were asking me to stop.
No. I was scratching my leg.
Oh. Yeah, and we found many common points between our practices. For example, Anna has been working with musicians, especially experimental musicians like myself, a lot recently. And we found different ways of kind of like navigating this artistic space in Chicago through our practices.
Why'd you hit me?
You had a mosquito. Chiquita, concéntrate.
Okay. Yeah. So I came to Chicago from Puerto Rico in 2014 to do a bachelor's in graphic design and visual communication design, and I met Luis along the way. We met each other through mutual friends in the Latino party circuit, and I think that we started dating towards the end of my college time. And once I was out, actually, I think his knowing him and being a part of his world really helped me as a graphic designer and helped start off my career. Um, because, in school, they teach you a lot of things about branding and packaging and big corporation stuff and just things I wasn't that interested in. I was more interested in cultural institutions, events. And so meeting Luis was great because he, was orbiting in these sort of the musician, composer, performance circles that I was interested in working with. And that led to a lot of work because they know a lot of musicians, but they don't know a lot of designers. So I became the designer for the composers and the performers of new music here in Chicago. Well, not here, there in Chicago. um, so yeah, I think Luis was one of the biggest tools for me to even start my graphic design career and also my studio. Uh, the whole idea actually came from a client that I met through Luis a few years after graduating, right?
The whole idea
of starting the studio that I had my.
I didn't know.
Yeah, it happened after I had a potential of getting this really big client that Luis introduced me to.
That's true.
And I was just one person, and it didn't seem that legitimate when I was telling them about how much it costs to do design. And I thought about it some more, and I was like, you know what? People would probably take me seriously if I just had a studio around me and like a we attached to it. So that's actually how it started. Yeah, I thought that like maybe they'll take me more seriously and they'll actually want to pay me money if I take out the freelancer title and give myself a studio title. And that's when I started talking to my partner and created the concept of our studio.
Yeah. So, personally, I've been in experimental music since I was maybe 16 in Mexico, and I got so into it that I decided to study composition when I was 18, and I moved to Mexico City from a smaller city called Aguascalientes. And yeah, originally I thought I was going to be a percussionist, but then I became more oriented towards creating different kinds of music, especially either experimental or very traditional Mexican and Latin American music. And Yeah, I ended up in Chicago because when I was in my undergrad, I met the some composers and performers from this ensemble called Phonema Consort, who are all kind of like orbiting around Northwestern in one way, or related to Northwestern in one way. And I realized that I really liked everything that was going on in that ensemble and also in the artistic world in Chicago. So when I finished my undergrad, I decided to apply only to Northwestern. I mean, that makes it sound like I was more decided than I was. I also couldn't afford to pay for any other
You also had no
applications.
idea about any other
I
universities
also
in the
didn't have
US. If
any.
you asked Luis what, Harvard or Yale is, he probably couldn't tell you back
I
then.
mean,
Okay, maybe Harvard, but not
I've heard
any
about
of the
those too, but I
other
didn't know
ones.
anything about their music programs. And anyways, I just applied to Northwestern, and fortunately, it worked out. So yeah, I've been doing my PhD for the last 6 years there.
Yeah, lots of
and
years.
and then meeting a lot of the people in the new music world in Chicago and in the U.S. in general, and also, I mean, hence meeting a lot of people related to the Ear Taxi Festival that
Yeah.
we're going to be that we have a relationship with in
In
different
our own
ways.
ways. Yeah, actually, Luis, like I was saying, Luis really has been the one to get me all of the clients because when I had heard that Ear Taxi Festival existed. I remember you told me about this big festival that was happening out of the University of Chicago. And I got really excited about it because I was like, well, I do a lot of design for new music people. Maybe I'll be able to do design for this festival. It's actually a really big deal.
But just to
in
be
the
clear, I
city.
didn't get it for
No,
you.
I know you didn't. I'm just saying I'm explaining how it happened
Yeah,
so that no
because-
one thinks that you gave it to me because that's not the fact.
You got it for yourself.
No,
Right?
so no, what happened was um, I was really excited about the whole thing, and I was one day I was at a concert that you dragged me to that I was not, particularly excited to go to, and I was standing in the line for the drinks after the concert, and I heard two guys talking about how Ear Taxi Festival was coming back, and I was like, oh my god, this is my chance. So then I can't remember when they officially announced that it was happening, but you were doing your application for their open call, and I asked you if you could give me their information so I could harass them, and you did. And I did harass them, and then I got the job because I harassed them enough.
Yeah, I don't think they were even looking for a graphic designer.
They were,
Oh,
but
they
they
were?
just hadn't announced it publicly. I just when I called
Yeah, we
them,
didn't know that they were looking for one.
Yeah, no, when I called them and I emailed them. When I emailed them the first time, they were like, well, you're right on time because we were just about to start, deciding on a graphic designer. And I managed to find them right in the perfect moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and so in a way we applied to Ear Taxi in some way or another. For example, I was applying with my um, collective composition and free improvisation trio called Fat Pigeon with Emily Beisel and Craig Davis Pinson. And yeah, so I was applying kind of like in the name of the three of us. And then this um, percussion quartet called Beyond This Point that I wrote a piece for asked me if I was um, okay with them including a piece of mine in their application, and I said yes, and both of things ended up happening, fortunately. So
we did good.
Yeah, I mean, it's also really, really humbling to be part of this huge project that it's by far, I think, the biggest music festival in Chicago. It's just so many concerts, so many people involved. And that's not easy to say because you have Nunk, for example, which is this festival from Northwestern that is also very, very, very cool and great. But Ear Taxi is just kind of it's huge.
I mean, that's a whole other beast. I mean, they have the support of so many organizations and so many. They're going to be presenting in so many locations. It's going to be really big.
So it's really, for me, and I can say also the other members of Fat Pigeon, it was very. I mean, we're honored to be part of it. Also, very humbling to be there with so many people that we know and so many people that we know of. um, and yeah, that's kind of like how that's our involvement with the Ear Taxi Festival.
Yeah.
I'd say.
It's been a wild ride also because I was involved in it way before Luis was officially a part of it. And so we had to, I was kind of riding the waves of the drama with the pandemic and how everyone was going to handle it. And we were considering doing online or going, to postponing. And like, it was strange that something that directly affected him was something that I was kind of seeing from the back, from behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, for example, if we had to describe uh, Ear Taxi and its significance to the community, I would say that I mean it's the second iteration, right? So it's like very young uh, music festival. It also like it happened. Well, the first time it happened was almost 5 years ago, right? So in a way, it's like something big that happened 5 years ago that is coming back, and that I can I mean, I think that most of us in the community, if not everyone, is expecting it or hoping it becomes something that it's that continues, that goes
right.
on. Hopefully, maybe with some fixed, I don't know, date of repetition, like every 2 years or something.
I mean, yeah, I think that's the goal. The one of the biggest goals I think of your taxi is to highlight the greatness of Chicago music and just everything that has happened, all the music that has happened in the past and that's happening in the present and that's coming in the future.
Mm.
It's really important to them to kind of establish Chicago as a place that is important musically.
Which already is, right?
It already is, but yeah, they want to kind of cement that identity, and I think that having a festival dedicated to it is really important.
Yeah, it's really cool because I mean, for example, personally, one of the other reasons why I applied only to Northwestern is because I was very interested in the Chicago music scene from before I even heard about Northwestern. Like, there's historically speaking, for like some very important Mexican composers like Julian Carrillo or Silvestre Revueltas. They had the opportunity to write a lot of very cool music in Chicago, and to um, like for example Julian Carrillo, he could do a lot of very experimental stuff there, and had it, I don't know, be better received than in some of the most like reactionary places in the Mexican conservatories. And I think it's it's really cool that there's a big festival that kind of like also tries to look back into all this history of the Chicago music scene as a very international scene. And like, for example, I know that Ensemble Aliente, which is a very important ensemble in Ear Taxi, they play the music of Julian Carrillo and Silvestre Revueltas, and like they are looking into this history and playing off of it.
Yeah, and that's why I think Chicago generally is a place that is so great because of its accessibility to resources. Like, if you lived in another major city, getting to meet, your favorite graphic designer from your favorite studio or your favorite performer from an ensemble that you really admire would be a lot difficult. Like in Chicago, it's so much simpler, I think. Like, people are much more open to.
It's very personable.
Yeah, people are just nicer, and the community is a little bit smaller. Like, if we were in New York City, I don't think I would have met half the designers that I have met that I respect.
Yeah.
Or not even half, not even two.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. It's very cool that it's happening again. Hopefully, it will continue to happen regularly.
Into the chat because I feel like it's delaying it. I'm just kind of curious. What's the reasoning behind like the 5-year gap between both?
I think it was just that they didn't have the resources and the kind of like administrative capacities at the time.
Probably. And also, I know that the person who the people who started the Air Taxi Festival just didn't. I probably just didn't have the bandwidth to tackle it anymore.
Yeah, it's like such a titanic effort.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were like, we don't know if it's gonna happen again.
Yeah,
so
it was great the first time, but it's a lot of work to put on the second one because, the first one got such recognition and it was so spoken about and applauded that the second one was probably going to be an even bigger beast than the first one.
Oh.
But yeah, I'm not entirely sure. We haven't spoken to the people who started the festival in 2016.
Okay.
I can't tell you for certain.
Yeah, we're not completely what we think.
But that's like what I've understood.
Okay, so you two have kind of like been able to be involved with like this resurgence of what once was like a really big cultural event. Okay.
Right.
And it was something that was cool is that, for example, I had been for a few months in Chicago when the Year Taxi Festival happened, the first one.
Oh, you were there?
I was there. I went to a couple of concerts, but I was not involved with it at all. I was like, it also felt a little bit like out of reach because I was just starting there. Like nobody knew me. I also hadn't done a lot. It's not like I have now, but you know what I mean. I have done more.
You've done a lot.
So it was also really nice to. It's really cool to be able to experience the second iteration from a point in which I feel like I'm part of the community, in which I know a lot of the people there, and also looking back into that time where it was just something that happened and I was just able to see and listen to.
So weird how you grow.
We didn't even have met.
Yeah,
we hadn't even met.
Hadn't we? No, we hadn't even met yet.
Well, how did that feel? Just going from like, being a bystander watching it to like, I don't know, like Anna was saying, like, I mean, 5 years feels like a long time, but that's also like a lot to be switching that position, from like listener to now being a part of it. Like, how do you feel like that process was in general for the both of you? I know, Anna, you weren't there, but to also
I wasn't there for the first one, but I was there for like what would you call that?
Well,
I mean, not its shadow, for like what its after effect, its side effects.
Yeah, like I mean, for example, I saw some very cool concerts that I would just sometimes mention, and people would talk about some things that happened in Air Taxi. Like, for example, most of my friends are musicians in Chicago, so most of them had different experiences with it. So Anna, in a way, was hearing about Air Taxi.
Yeah, I mean, for not having ever heard of it until the new one came out, like not having seen it or been a part of it, I think that I had a very clear idea of how important it was. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember one time I was a substitute teacher at a school in Chicago, and I was sitting in one of the teachers' offices, and I saw a calendar that gave like important Chicago people, and the woman who started, what's her name? I'm really bad.
Oh yeah, me too. And I know her, and she's really important. A big deal. And
cut it.
We'll pause it.
So I remember when I was a substitute teacher in a school in Chicago, I was sitting in the teachers' offices, and they had a calendar of important Chicago people, and Augusta Reed Thomas was on the calendar, and they were mentioning her involvement with Air Taxi among all of her other accomplishments. But I was like, wow, this person really has left a mark in Chicago.
I mean, it was always spoken about like Air Taxi Festival kind of like as being Augusta's kind of like baby in a way, kind of like she's the one who made it happen.
And now New Music Chicago is making it happen bigger.
Yeah, it's like the heritage of.
Yeah, no. I think that it's funny because, it was her baby, but it's very much New Music Chicago's baby. They care about it so much. It's their, pride and joy. They just want it to be incredible for everyone and for the performers and for the audience. they've just put so much time and effort into it that it's like,
Also, something that is really cool is that I mean, I don't know exactly how the first festival worked in terms of venues, but if I remember correctly, they were usually in kind of like Chicago's better known venues.
no pueden hablar de los venues,
No?
de los nuevos no.
Ah,
Todavía
okay.
no está released.
So I can't speak about the venues. So.
Okay. We'll cut that.
Got it. We can't go into the details until they're officially announced.
Okay.
When is Ear Taxi Festival 2? When is that gonna be starting?
I have the new date. I'll tell you.
I know there's gonna be September, end of September and beginning of October.
Yeah, I think it's the 23rd. I got it.
So for New Music Chicago, what kind of organization is that?
I think Anna is the best one to answer that.
Hold on, finding dates. You talk about something else in the meantime.
Okay, I guess talking about your process from being at Ear Taxi to now being a performer, what do you feel like was kind of your mindset, or like what did you feel that you wanted to work on, like just professionally or also just like personally as a musician, to like, not that the goal was Ear Taxi, but just to be able to open those opportunities up?
Maybe I can talk about kind of like what, like as an ensemble, and then get some like Fat Pigeon, how
Yeah.
we, and like what we're planning to do with it, and also how we are planning for this um, performance to be kind of like a particular new experience of what we're doing. Does that make sense? Like, you want me to maybe? Okay, so speaking in terms of, or speaking for Fat Pigeon, we're very excited about our project, or like what we want to propose. Sorry, it's very distracting.
It's fine. I won't do anything. Nothing matters.
Okay, I'm gonna try again.
Okay.
So my trio, Fat Pigeon. So what we suggested, or what we applied with to Ear Taxi, is this set that involves some sort of costumes made by a very dear friend and excellent. He's a puppet maker and also an artist in general. His name is Daniel Robles, and we have been wanting to work with him for a while, because he's also someone from the um, like the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and like from the artistic world that is not the music scene Chicago, who has been kind of like, I don't know, like flirting with the new music scene in one way or another. And we have been wanting him to make something for us to play with. So when the Ear Taxi called for performances and everything happened, we're like, okay, this is the perfect opportunity. So our plan is that Daniel is going to make some masks for us to perform. So these masks are going to serve as some sort of instrument in a way. We're going to have, I mean, I don't want to spoil it too much, but the idea is that they're going to let us hide a lot of the things that we're doing, which is something that we like to do in Fat Pigeon a lot. We like to be able to mask a lot of our sounds, and because they usually blend very well, it happens a lot that the audience can't tell who's playing what and what sound is coming from where. So with Daniel, we're trying to make this happen even more with this kind of like half costume, half instrument masks that we're going to be using. So it's really cool, and also kind of like keeps connecting different parts of the Chicago artistic scene, even with people who don't live in Chicago anymore, like Daniel, or like me. um, but in this, like, at the same time, we have very deep uh, associations or relations with Chicago. Was that?
That was good. Yeah,
You're supposed to be telling me
yeah.
our conversation, not you telling
Okay.
other people.
What do you think, Chiquita?
I blanked out because you weren't telling me. I know all this, so I'm just like, wow.
Oh, I had asked before though, kind of like what kind of organization is the new music of Chicago? Which Louis said you would be better fit to answer that question.
I can tell you.
Oh, man. Is this kind of like maybe like the biggest event you've been able to work on with other people?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, this is the biggest project that we've had so far. Um, just like on a scale kind of side, like there's so much that we need to do, and there's so many people involved, and there's so many things to be made for the festival that it's like a crazy amount of work. But it's really exciting at the same time because this is the kind of work that always made me excited about design. Um, so it's a cool project to work on, but I'm like scared to tell you what New Music Chicago is because I don't want to get it wrong.
Oh no, honestly, okay, I should have prefaced this, but this recording is essentially whoever gets to listen to it is up to you two. So if you wanted to make it personal for like friends and family to kind of let them know, hey, there's this really cool project that I'm working on, like here's a little conversation I had about it to kind of explain it more, or I mean, there's no right or wrong. Like our model for this is just a conversation to kind of like keep little pockets of oral history, you know? Like I know now it probably sounds weird to talk about it out loud, like the process of it, but then like maybe looking back to be like, what was like my mindset at when we were going through that, you know?
Yeah.
What's our
If that
mindset going through this? I feel like you feel a little more relaxed about the whole project than I do.
Yeah, I mean, my participation isn't just a tiny piece. Like, you are really working with the whole festival.
Yeah.
Like, however people see, well, I mean, not however, but like what people will see of your taxi is gonna be related to you directly.
Yeah, no pressure.
No
It's
pressure.
really
Yeah.
scary. Like it's every designer is excited, like always dreams of having a project that a lot of people are gonna see and that will get a lot of attention. But then when it comes down to it, it's actually really scary to do that and to produce that. Like you're kind of holding down the visual identity and the recognition of this entity on
Yeah.
your shoulders, sort of. Like if no one pays attention to it, it's your fault, sort of.
I mean, also, to be fair, it's like also a very, like, if it's a success or if it's a failure, let's say, it's not yours only, right? Because you need to be working with people from New Music Chicago, with your partner at the studio. I mean, not now as much as before, but I mean, at the end, it also involves.
Yeah, it does. That's what it makes it better, also, because there's a lot of people, like the people who are in charge have very clear vision of what they want it to be and what they hope for the festival. So it's just a matter of translating that into a thing that you can look at.
Yeah. Do you think it's more like you're trying to put their vision into images and translate what they want, or is it like you're trying to give an image to your taxi and then you get feedback from them? Because I feel like it's more like the former.
No, it's
No,
the latter
is that right?
entirely. That's one of the great things about the team I'm working with in New Music Chicago. One of their biggest things was that they wanted to support artists and designers. They care a lot about your work and your voice and your visions for things. And so when when we were actually speaking about what we wanted to do for design, they were really clear about being super open to anything that any ideas we might have, to any visual languages we might be interested in, because they wanted to be able to highlight us as much as they're highlighting their performers and their musicians. I mean, obviously the performers and the musicians are going to be on a like different level, but they do really care about giving us a voice, which was really important to us because that's not something that clients are normally very open to. A lot of times a client will have a very clear idea of what they want, and all you have to do is just make it, put it into a design program until they're happy.
That's really cool.
And New Music Chicago has been amazing with just kind of giving us the freedom to do our research, to explore different avenues, and to make some pretty big design decisions. And also they're really great because when you, like, sometimes they'll pick something that's not entirely what you were imagining, and they're super open to like talk about anything. You can sit down with them and be like, I think that this was like that there was a better choice and this is why, and they'll listen to you and
That's
consider
cool.
it, which is very, very rare when working with clients
Do you
in
think
design.
do you think that kind of like your previous experience with making design for album covers of new music and concerts also of new music and all of this, do you think that in a way, like, are those experiences informing a lot of what you're doing, or do you think
Yeah.
it's kind of like a completely different animal?
I mean, I would say that yes, I definitely have gotten the experience from other clients in the new music community. But I mean, like I said, this is the first time I'm dealing with a project on such a large scale. So there's definitely things that are very different. It's not just making a one-off concert
Sure.
flyer for somebody.
No, I guess my question was more like, I mean, I think the answer is obviously yes, but maybe how do you think that all your previous experience with designing for the new music world kind of like informed the aesthetic decisions of, of the ear taxi? Because like I imagine that if you hadn't had that experience before, maybe your approach to this new music festival would be pretty different.
Hmm. I mean,
Like, because you've been to concerts, you've been to album releases, you've seen a lot of rehearsals, and like you're really part of
yeah,
this world.
but you know what? I think that when coming up, like, I do think it helped in like understanding a little bit of what other people have been excited by in my design. Um, so I think that that was definitely an aspect like that I brought into the design I did for Ear Taxi. But the thing is that when we were working on it in the studio, there was a really big focus on doing our own research separately, and it wasn't always relevant to the design I had done before. I think what did help a lot was to have that design to kind of prove to Ear Taxi that we were capable of handling
Yeah.
this sort of project. They clearly liked the kind of work that we were doing, and they liked where it went. They thought it was, fun yet elegant enough to represent them, which is really nice.
Yeah. It's cool that you have such a particular experience of this world that is honestly very small.
Yeah.
And also kind of like, I mean, maybe not in an ivory tower necessarily, but it's usually pretty inaccessible to most people. Not because, I mean, especially as an audience of all of this, it's not that it's super expensive to be there to go to a concert. All of this, it's just that people don't know. Like, there's no.
Yeah, it's inaccessible in that it's very like clandestine.
In some ways, yes.
um, yeah, that's why I think it's so interesting, and that's why it's like exciting to me to be a part of it, because I feel like I'm breaking into something that it's not big yet, but it's gonna be like really big.
Yeah,
later.
it really brings it to a different level of accessibility and level of
Definitely.
visibility.
That's something that I've always said, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that new music could use a lot of visual help to make it accessible to others. Because, there's a lot of people that end up interested in it. Like my mother, for example, she loves Luis's music. But she only liked it and after she got a very clear and detailed explanation on what each piece was inspired by and what each piece was speaking about. So she needed a lot of explanation to get interested in it. I think that you could do the same in less time with visual help.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it also is like it tends to be an acquired taste, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of like when you're a child and you taste beer for the first time, you think it's the most horrible thing in the world.
It's still kind of gross.
And then the more you drink it, the more you think it's. I mean, you get used to it, and then you start appreciating it, right? And I think that like with new music is like that. So you do need as many.
You just need to capture people's interest to get into it.
Yeah.
And then
it becomes wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's also now in today's day and age we're so visual. Like we have constant like visual content to look at.
Yeah.
That it's hard for people to sit down and listen to things instead of just seeing things. Even the music that we listen to is attached to a visual. There's a music video. There's a concert.
And it's also like 3 minutes long. Usually, and like these pieces are 20 minutes long or like 40 or.
Yeah, or what? I remember when we first met, you went to a concert that was like 8 hours long.
It was 6. It was 6 a piece that was 6. It is 6 hours long.
I don't know how anyone who's more of a visual person can sit through that for 6 hours.
I mean, this is also like a very extreme piece. This is by Morten Feldman. It's a string quartet that is 6 hours long.
Yeah.
And like, of course, has been played super few times. But yeah. Like, I mean, it was almost unbearable for me too, because like just listening to something for 6 hours is super exhausting.
Yeah, and also I find that new music is pretty like centered in academia still.
Yeah, definitely.
It still comes out directly from there, and there's not a huge focus on a huge focus or like a huge budget to advertise it to the general public.
I mean, there's also an attitude towards that, right? Like we are not commercial. We are not I mean, it is what you're saying, but also there's a historical attitude towards not being popular.
Yeah, I guess.
That has been challenged a lot, especially recently. But like is this elitism?
Yes. I wonder if it's similar to how my mom views design, because my mother's a scientist and a researcher, and I've told her millions of times that if her presentations and her proposals were prettier, maybe other people would be interested in them. And she tells me that in the scientific academic community, they're like that would get you laughed out of a room if you focus too much on the visual aspect rather than on the content. Like people would not take you seriously. So I wonder if in the academic music world they also perceive it that way.
I think like there's this kind of that mindset has been there for a long time, very much informed also by like very big names, like philosophers who have spoken about new music, like for example, like Theodore Adorno, in which like there's definitely an aspect of the non-commercial part of this music and the non-popular, whatever that means, characteristic of this music that, like in the science world, as you're saying, that it kind of like demerits whatever you're doing if you're trying to not even sell it, because
trying
it's
too
not
hard to like convince people to be interested, then maybe they shouldn't be interested.
Exactly.
In the first place.
And I disagree with that.
So do I.
I mean, a lot of people.
I mean, the funny thing also is that this is supposed to be a career for people. How is it going to be a career if you're not trying to sell it to people? Where do you? I mean,
because also this comes a lot from like lots of Marxist ideas that these should be supported by the government, regardless of like you don't need people buying it for it to be successful. And I actually agree with that at some extent.
I mean, that would be lovely.
But I mean, we're really far from that.
Yeah, we're not in an environment, not in a state of the world where that's a thing yet.
Yeah.
At least not here.
I mean, also like the US compared to Mexico, for example, is, and to most places, it is a country where a lot of the new music, the funding for the new music comes from private sources. And like, for example, in Mexico, you have a huge festival, the Manuel Enriquez. That's all governmentally funded.
And you have grants and fellowships that are given to artists every year.
And I'm not trying to romanticize. It also has many issues, but like in that sense, that's also why, going back to the Ear Taxi, that's why Ear Taxi is such a big deal, because it's kind of like as big as you can get in the US without like being completely governmentally funded. It's really hard. Like, I mean, I don't know about where money comes from, like for Ear Taxi, but I'm sure it comes from many sources, and I would bet that many of them, if not most of them, if not all of them, are private. So why were you here? Oh yeah, so it's really cool.
Just have.
I mean, Ear Taxi is kind of like also trying to achieve this level of visibility and accessibility, despite this kind of like this thing that makes it more complicated. That is that the government doesn't fund it to the extent that other
and music in general, because they're not only focusing on new music. There's also going to be other kinds of music involved that they want to highlight. But yeah, I think I can't remember what we're saying.
We were talking about kind of like this.
So how do you turn it into a career then? Like, if nobody wants to make it visual, like, how do you make money off of it? How do I say that your music is gonna be the next like big thing that's gonna make us all like? Well, how are we gonna make a living?
Well, that's a huge problem because it really limits the ways in which you can get money. You can become an academic professor. That is not like,
that's very hard.
1,000 positions, not even 100 positions available.
Right now, there's not even 2 positions available.
It's very, very hard. And like, if you work in other areas, I mean, it kind of has to be either something that you do on the side, and which is really hard because this is something that it's so complicated that you should be able to invest all of your energy in it. But currently, that's not something that most people, like 90-something% people can do.
Don't you think that makes new music very inaccessible to a lot of communities
who
don't have the luxury?
Are you kidding me? Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's a good mindset to have right now. That like making it more accessible or appealing, the merits. I think it's very obtuse to say that.
Yeah.
Obtuse, is that a word, or did I just make it that obtuso?
I think
Spanish.
It's a word.
Okay, let's say that it's a word. It's very limited, to say the least.
Yeah. It's okay.
I agree. I think, and also, I mean, I would say that a lot of efforts are being done towards making it more appealing. And like also, I mean, why would you make it more appealing? Because it is really appealing. It's just hard to get into it,
Yeah.
So,
hard to access.
As you say, you need some help.
And I'm here to help.
And I think that's great. You have. I mean, with some really cool album covers and some posters.
I've made like 2 album covers.
Are really in the Sidement albums?
You're right.
I know more of what you've done than you.
Yeah, but I consider them all the same project.
Nah. Or like, for example, some of the posters that you made for concerts, like the Megalopolis Saxophone Orchestra, like the one you made for Nikki, or the one that you made for Kyle Flance's concert that had a piece of mine. Like, that's something that I still see and have, and it becomes kind of like an object that you can appreciate on its own, but it's always referencing something that happened and something that you can still hear recordings.
Right. Yeah, no. I remember, I think I was going to say that just since there's no focus on design really, or not that much focus on it, you see a lot of kind of sad looking posters and album
just
covers
a few of them.
Websites. It's a little depressing, which is why it's exciting for me because there's a lot to like do.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's something that a lot of people are working on, but it still is the minority of the new music, people would say.
It's okay, I'll make you guys all famous. Just wait.
Okay, perfect. I'll wait.
Do you feel like there's some bridges to that gap in accessibility? In the sense of like there's a lot of, Chicago music being presented, but in terms of like how to get involved in those scenes or resources, kind of like resource allocation or stuff like that.
I mean, I think there are many bridges that can help gap that bridge. Many of them have to do with money, as you say. A lot of, I mean, we definitely live in a world where, for most of the population, it's really hard to dedicate themselves to not only music, but a music that is really challenging to listen to perform, that really tries to push the boundaries in different ways. And I mean, it's really hard to dedicate yourself to that. It's really hard to even sometimes invest enough time and money and energy to be partially part of it. Like, that's the truth. Like, if you look at most of the population, especially, like low income, there's no time for that and energy for that. So I would say, I guess that's also part of this kind of like Marxist ideal in new music, that we need to arrive to a point in which people are well enough, economically speaking, so that all these intellectual um, and artistic challenges can be taken by most of the population and they can participate in that. Yes, that would be cool.
I mean, education is also very important.
Of course, education.
Like, and educators who are aware of that world as an option as well. Like, I know that in a lot of places, arts and music education funding is cut when it's not absolutely necessary, when there's like more pressing matters, quote unquote.
Or sometimes not quote unquote.
Yeah, sometimes there's
actually,
other really important things.
Definitely more pressing.
But I think when you expose the kids to it also, that gives them an opportunity to really consider that as an option, as a potential. Because I mean, when you always wanted to be a musician, but you as a person in Mexico were living as a composer, trying to work 3 jobs to sustain yourself, having access and knowing that there's this like you can get into academia and be sustained in some way by an institution to be able to create this work was a huge opportunity. And I think that if students in high schools, even in lower income areas or in places that don't have access to these resources, if they knew in the first place about new music or music in general, and they knew that they could go to school for that and that they could get funded to do that professionally or academically, that would open a lot more doors, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that actually brings me to the second point that I think that could really help gap the bridge, which is
bridge the gap.
Bridge to gap the bridge, which is that a lot of the new music scene, like we keep talking about new music, right? But like this is something that also applies to a lot of music in plural, in general, right? And I'm thinking, for example, of some, like I'm thinking of the Zapatistas, for example, right, who are not entirely Marxists and have like this very profound sense of community that operates in different ways. Like, I don't think this Marxist ideal is necessarily the only way to get out, or like, actually, I think it's very flawed in many ways. So, but I think that, for example, thinking about the Zapatistas and how much art happens in these communities and how much art flows from literally all the world to them and from them to all the world, in terms of like you have the comparte, which like people send all these drawings. And when I say people, I mean like 5-year-olds and 70-year-olds and 14-year-olds. Like there's also, in my opinion, kind of like this invisible wall maybe around this new music scene that doesn't really, I mean, it's changing. It's definitely changing, but hasn't really allowed a lot of people to participate in it just because of also its aesthetic constraints.
Mhm.
So then, fortunately, you now have a lot of people who are bringing lots of popular and traditional music into it successfully, not only artistically, but also without being completely rejected
Right.
and discriminated against, also, which happened a lot before. And I think this is also something that can really help bridge the gap. Is that new music also starts, the new music world and the academic world and the world in general is being more aware of its limitations in terms of um, who is part of this and why,
Right.
and like, it because of income and colonial situations and everything, like it so far it has been mostly white men, and that's changing a lot. It has changed a lot, and now we need that the people who get into all these things are not only a diverse group of people ethnically and racially, but also in terms of income, right? Like, like poor white men weren't also allowed into this because they just didn't have an access, no? And that's something that, for example, a rich Mexican would have way more access to it than a poor white person from the U.S. So all of these like social inequalities need to be addressed also for new music world to become more I don't know, to kind of like maybe achieve its full potential, as cheesy as it sounds.
Yeah.
It sounds very cheesy,
I mean,
but I
it
think
still has untapped potential.
Yeah, a lot.
What I really appreciate about graphic design, and it can sometimes, have like varying effects, but I think that one of the great things about graphic design is how accessible it is. Like I think designers generally, because there's some snobs, are much more accepting of people who don't have an education in graphic design, of people who haven't done it professionally previously, of people who are self-taught from YouTube. The programs are not entirely accessible, but people have found such magnificent workarounds. Those programs, like maybe they'll just have one, or they'll bootleg get a bootleg version of the program, or they'll just do it by hand. I mean, if you look at old posters for like house music in the 80s in Chicago, all of it is basically handmade or like cut and pasted. And so it's very interesting to see how anyone from any background could pick up, some typefaces and some colors and create a really interesting piece that could reach a lot of people.
Yeah, in that sense, I think we're also like in a very exciting time for art in general, and we're really seeing how all these amazing these amazing minds and creative minds that had no access to this and who had no possibilities of giving input to it, they're slowly having access to it. And now you see that, like, for example, in terms of gender inequality, right? Like, we were missing out so many amazing female composers or non-binary composers or trans, and now we are finally able to listen to what they have, right? And like in terms of art, visual art, I think is the same, right? So it's super exciting. We're finally getting more views of the world and than we ever had.
Yeah, I mean, we're still limited. I think
Of
there's
course,
still.
I'm not saying it's solved,
No.
but I'm saying, like, compared to not even that long
not
ago,
even that
like
long ago, yes,
20 years
definitely. There's so much more visibility, and there's something for everyone.
Again, I'm not saying we're done. Let's just like close the chapter.
Yeah.
But it's going somewhere really, really interesting, and it's not only about the goal, but like everything that's happening around it. It's super, super interesting. That's what I think. What do you think?
All right. I don't want to take up. Sorry, I just heard myself. I don't want to take up too much of your time. And we're getting towards the end of our time. So I guess the way we kind of normally end it is some takeaways. I feel like, or some takeaways from being a part of the festival in general, or like any reflections you two had just from the conversation in general that you'd want to like close with.
Well, for me, I'm just really excited to be a part of this festival because I feel like I'm a part of something that makes the world a little bit better instead of worse. I think a lot of graphic design work is focused on selling people things that they don't need and creating more waste and encouraging more consumption. And I think that working on a project that's so focused on visibility and on expression, on the community, the arts community as a whole, I think it's really exciting to be able to say that I did even a little bit, just the visual aspect of it. I don't know, it feels like I'm doing good rather than evil.
Yeah, that's an issue with graphic design, right?
Yeah, you always feel like you're doing evil.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, I'm just really excited to be a small part of all of this, and also to, despite not living in Chicago anymore, really reinforcing all my ties with the new music, the Chicago new music scene or art scene in general, with Chicago in general, and that's something I really hope I never lose. So um, it makes me happy to be a part of this community.